Lord knows we don't want you uncomfortable.
Nope, that's when mistakes happen.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. I hope everybody had a grand weekend. Well, I mean, your week has already started, but usually I take Mondays off. Well, off on the program anyway. Anyway, we did have a fantastic weekend, and this week is shaping up to be pretty busy. And to begin today's show, I just want to kind of give you a layout of what you can expect coming up on the program. On today's show, I have a great roundtable discussion with members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. Appropriations Chairman John Baer, his Vice Chairman, of course, the illustrious Agent 29, Representative Bill Allemand, and Representative Chris Knapp. And we're going to talk about something that I don't know if you caught it in coming from the cow pie, but I think that it's pretty important. And that is how the Wyoming media labels conservatives in any way possible. And they've discovered a new way to label conservatives, and they're calling us the new right. And it's mostly directed at the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. But I wanted to have a discussion with actual members of the Freedom Caucus and just talk about what that term, the new right, means, and then discuss what is the object of everybody, everybody in the media and some of the more liberal members of the legislature and liberal former members of the legislature's ire. And that's this whole nuclear thing. And to be honest with you, I started out being kind of on the fence because generally speaking, with any sort of new technology or new energy source or whatever, I try to get as much information as possible first and then make up my mind. But I'm leaning more towards saying that we don't have the technology to handle this in the way that I think that it ought to be handled. Secondly, I don't think that this is a conservative idea at all. And let me explain that in Wyoming, a great degree of our economy works on conservation. Now, conservation is a little bit different than conservatism, although the words start the same. But conservation is using what you have responsibly and preserving that resource. Let me give you a great example: wildlife. And I used this example during the roundtable with the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. But in Wyoming, I would say a majority of the people that live here hunt and fish. If you're not a hunter, you probably go fishing every now and again. Well, you have to manage those wildlife populations, and you still want to allow hunting. And you have to manage the population, because when populations get too big, disease starts and it destroys your herd. And there's lots of examples of that. Chronic wasting disease is just one of those, and there are others. Whirling disease in fish, tularemia in rabbits. That's why you never eat a rabbit before the first frost, because, they carry a bug. Well, when populations get too big, God kind of has set up a way that populations control themselves, and it's usually through disease. And so we don't want that to happen, and so we manage the populations through hunting and fishing. We don't issue too many permits to damage the population, and we don't want to issue too few that allows the population to expand. And so you manage those resources, but you do it in a conservative manner. So the question is, when it comes to all this nuclear business, is that conservation? I would say not, because you're creating a place where you're going to store everybody else's nuclear waste. And let me just put that stupid rumor to rest right now. It is not just going to be Wyoming nuclear waste, because the folks that are pushing this, Bo Beitman, and it never fails, Agent 29. I start a subject and then I think in my head, man, I really should have prepped those sound bites. But it was Cowboy State Politics that broke the sound bites from Bo Beitman at a conference in Florida, saying that we all want nuclear waste. Well, the reason they want it is there's a huge pile of money from the federal government to the tunes of billions of dollars. So it is not just going to be Wyoming nuclear waste that's going to end up in any waste storage facility. It'll be everybody else's. Secondly, we're playing around with language. It's not nuclear waste. It's spent nuclear fuel rods. Okay, so riddle me this, riddle me that. So if you have something that you use for fuel, and say a log, for example, and you throw the log in your fireplace and it burns and burns and burns and burns, and you wake up in the morning and there's this chunk of black thing sitting in your fireplace. Well, it's not going to burn anymore. You've already burned it, which means it's not going to release any more energy. So that black thing in your fireplace ends up being waste. And whatever's left, ashes, they're of no use whatsoever. Same thing here. It doesn't matter if it's a spent nuclear fuel rod or if you call it nuclear waste. It's the same thing.
Not only are they, I think, errantly chasing federal dollars,
I think that's what it
which
is.
come with federal regulations and intervention and everything else. That's not conservatism.
No.
If we become addicted to this federal funding for whatever reason, and look at all the wonderful things we can do with this money, what happens when that federal funding changes? You get somebody else in a different administration that is not nuclear friendly or whatever. Now the money dries up, and if the money dries up, the safety dries up.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're talking about something that remains radioactive for not 20 years, not 50 years, not even 100 years, thousands of years. And if...
Oh, but these canisters are tested for like 10 to 40 years. We know they'll be good.
Yeah, they'll be good. So says Dan Sabrowski. But, the problem I have here is you can't prove to me that the technology works. And are you sure these nuclear canisters that we're going to store everything, they're good for 40 years? Okay, fine. What happens after 40 years? Because the darn stuff isn't going to be, broken down in 40 years. It takes, in some cases, depending on the isotope, thousands of years. So you can't prove to me that the technology is going to work. You can't prove to me that it's going to be safe. And while sometimes I do like to gamble, I'm a terrible poker player. Sometimes I think I should just write a check to whichever poker table I'm at, and I'd be done with it. But one thing before, and I'm going to play this roundtable for you here in just a second, but I just want to talk to you for a minute, and I want you to listen to me. That just because we disagree does not mean that we have to be disagreeable. Now, I'll admit on my program, I take some pretty hard shots at some of the redcoats, but I prove what I'm saying. And, you know, when you have a group of people that generally speaking agree, and then there's one issue that crops up, this nuclear business, and you disagree on it, that does not mean the people that are on the other side are evil. Heck, they used to be your friends. You used to go to conferences together and rallies and all sorts of things, and go shooting and fishing and hunting. And just because we happen to disagree on one minor point does not mean that you should be insulting or anything, anything like that. I've got a good example for you here just in a second.
Yeah, it also means that they may not. I've heard it said that we're just ill-informed and ignorant. I, like you, spent quite a deal of time over the last couple of weeks reading, studying. I sat down with some others, with a representative from Radiant Nuclear, and asked questions. I was not at all satisfied with the answers.
Well, you didn't get any answers.
There were some answers, but I was not pleased with that. And I came away from that table even less confident of what Radiant is doing. There's another meeting set up, so I'm not done gathering information. Maybe somewhere down the road somebody will show me something that changes my mind. But the more I learn about it, the less confident I am in the science behind it. And even if all the science were proven hands down what it is, as long as the vast majority of Wyoming residents are adamantly opposed to it, I think it would be a mistake as a representative, that's my job, to push back against it anyway, just so that we can get some federal money coming into the state. Just a big mistake.
Well, and I think if you look at, there's a number of informal polls that are floating around on social media, and every single one of them is overwhelmingly against this. But I want to go back to what I said, is that just because we disagree on something doesn't mean that we have to consider the person on the other side to be our enemy now. And a really good example, there's a piece in the Cowboy today, and it's a column by Campbell County Commissioner Scott Clem, former Representative Scott Clem. Now, I don't agree all the time with Scott. He and I disagreed, in fact, face to face a couple of times. But that doesn't mean that we, generally speaking, aren't on the same side of everything. Well, he's got to call him out. And I know what he was intending. He intended it to be satirical, to kind of poke fun at some of the more extreme comments on this whole nuclear issue. But if you read the piece, and I suggest that you do, go read it. It comes off pretty darned insulting. And, I don't know if Scott meant it that way, but that's certainly how it comes off. Now, yes, there are billions and billions of dollars that we could, that Wyoming could get from this, for sure. But look at the long-term consequences. Make sure that the science is there. Make sure that you're informed, that you're not just making a knee-jerk reaction to all of this. All right, in just a second, I'm going to play that video, but I want to explain one thing before we hit play. The piece in the Cowboy, which was written by Claire McFarland, which is where we begin our discussion with the panel. In the piece, Claire McFarland references the Libertarian Party of Wyoming. Now, when you watch the video, and you'll see it, it's pretty obvious, you'll see a look of disdain, disgust even, on my face. And the reason for that is I was thinking about the person masquerading as the Libertarian Party online, on social media. And if you've seen any of this person's posts, and for the life of me right now, I don't know who that is. But if you see any of his posts, they're pretty nasty. That's who I was thinking about when I read the piece from Claire McFarland, and when we were talking about it during the interviews. So just keep that in mind. I'm not talking about the Libertarian Party in Wyoming. I think that there's some pretty well-intentioned people, though in some cases I think they're a little bit misguided. That's why I'm a conservative and not a libertarian. But anyway, I just wanted to explain that to you. So without any further ado, go ahead and play the video, Ken. Categorize or characterize the Wyoming Freedom Caucus as the new right. And the piece, I think, personally, it was just nothing more than a bunch of political drivel. They went to the Libertarian Party of Wyoming as evidence of, to use in the piece. So I thought that we'd take some time and talk to some members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus about what the term new right means and what it is that the Wyoming Freedom Caucus does believe. So joining me on the program is Representative Bill Alamand, Representative John Baer, and Representative Chris Knapp, and of course, Agent 29. Guys, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
I guess where I'd like to start is with you, Chairman Baer. And why don't you just first give me your gut level reaction of the piece that was in the Cowboy State Daily?
Well, my gut reaction is it's very heavily editorialized, which not surprised by that coming from the Cowboy State Daily. But the claim that we are the new right is a new one. I remember about 18 months ago, they changed from calling us the far right to calling us the further right. And I guess that was their effort to get more viewership or followers, because they realized the more they attack us, the more it hurts their own reputation, because we do really identify with the people of Wyoming, more so probably than the media, based on their approval ratings, the media that is. And so I was not shocked that it was editorialized. You asked the question, what is the new right? And I think that the most common definition or understanding of that term out there today is that it's basically the far left coming all the way around and calling themselves the right, and they're the new right. And by that, I mean they're anti-capitalists, which I use the term they are because I don't believe that should include us being the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. So I'll let others opine on that if you'd like, but I have much more to say about the new right and where the Wyoming Freedom Caucus really is.
All right, we'll just pause for just a second. There's a couple of different pieces that are out. There's a particularly good editorial by John Stossel, and he discusses why the new right is pretty much anti-capitalist. So let me just take a minute or two and explain exactly what he means by the new right. We're seeing an interesting phenomenon in conservative circles that folks like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's a few others, have attempted to claim that, and I guess they have claimed, they haven't attempted to claim, that, America first means only America. There's a group of them that are extraordinarily anti-Israel. And there, as Chairman Baer said, there's a bunch of them that are anti-capitalist. And, there's a number of different articles that are out. There was one in the Free Press that was fairly interesting. It was written by kind of a leftist, but I'll go ahead and post both of those at cowboystatepolitics.com. So if you want to check out what this term, the new right, is, you can do that. But I'd like to give an opportunity to either Representative Alamand or Representative Knapp to give us your thoughts. Let's start with Representative Knapp.
Yeah, I think with the press, this is nothing new to me. It's a continuance of trying to divide people and put a class of people into something that can be demonized. So whether we were far right, MAGA, what they used to say of Tea Party, their goal is to treat you as the minority, when actually we're the majority. To me, all we are is freedom-loving, principled people who work for transparency and work for the general welfare of Wyoming and its citizens. And to label us with anything, they're going to continue to do that till the end of time. It'll be far right, radical right, every term that they come up with to try to make us seem like we're not of the norm.
Well, and it's interesting. They come up with terms like hard right, far right, further right, but you never hear them say hard left or extreme left or anything like that. If they're talking about somebody on the Wyoming left, they're always moderates. Chairman Baer?
Yeah, thank you for coming back to me. I just wanted to point out something that they use as a pejorative. They call us populists, and I do believe that there is a lot of the understanding of what a populist is that does apply to the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, because we do represent the vast majority, as Chris was saying. But I would also add a caveat that I think for most of us, we are constitutionalists first before we're populists. And so we would never let the population drive us against the original Constitution and Bill of Rights that we've sworn an oath to and that I frankly love. So I just wanted to add that little comment in there that I agree with Chris. They're never short of pejoratives for us.
Well, and the term populist is interesting anyway, simply because it is meant as a pejorative. And I think that a lot of it goes back to being able to convince a crowd of just about anything. It goes back to the principle of yelling fire in a crowded theater, which, by the way, you do have the right to scream fire in a crowded theater. But it's the ability to entice a crowd and to appeal to, more populist ideas. But when we look at President Trump, I mean, the left tries to label him as a populist. And, he got elected overwhelmingly. Now, Representative Alaman, you kind of drew most of the ire from the Cowboy State Daily. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think they just look at names to discourage us. And I think when we look at New Right, I think that's very wrong. I think we should be called the Old Right because we're the Constitutionalists.
Now we're adding
we are the ones that's following our founding fathers. We're the ones who want industry coming in and want development. What we don't want in this case, and that's why we're being called the New Right, is we do not want nuclear storage in Wyoming. But I would be more happy with conversation saying we're the Old Right.
Well, it's interesting because a big fan of Barry Goldwater is our pal Agent 29. And
before he went crazy.
Yeah, before he went crazy. But the term New Right actually started with Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley. And it was their devotion to conservative principles that people started labeling them. And I think that they kind of accepted the moniker, the New Right, as opposed to the establishment Republicans that we have a big problem with right now. Ken?
Yeah, I think part of the problem and part of what Claire, I believe, is trying to do is to paint us with a broad brush and use a term that has several connotations to it. It also has denotations. And some of the denotations of this near right term have to do with racism.
A lot of them do, yeah.
Yeah, they refer to, white Christian. And when they mean Christian, from what I've read, they're not necessarily talking about the evangelical type Christian. They're talking about the traditional, perhaps Catholic, but not just them, traditional beliefs, which have long had some issues to a lot of folks. So this is an attempt to, whenever we say something, then they immediately are able to categorize us and kind of discard us, put us on a shelf and say, don't worry about that. It is just a bunch of racist old white people. So we don't really want that old in there, Bill, as much as I respect the idea.
All right, let's go back to Chairman Bear. I know you had some more thoughts on this.
I do. Thank you. Thank you, David. First, I'll address what Bill was saying about capitalism before I go on to the racism. But I agree that we don't want the nuclear waste coming here, at least without, some level of confidence that it's going to be safe and effective, the storage. And we're talking about the same people that told us that an experimental vaccine was safe and effective. We found that not to be true. So I'm a little bit leery of bringing it in. I don't know how successful we're going to be at pushing back on that, because if you look at the Texas case, the federal government is really preparing to shove this down somebody's throat. And with only 588,000 people in Wyoming, I think we're target number one for that. So it's going to probably take every Wyomingite to really push back on this if we want to avoid becoming the next waste dump site for nuclear waste. And I would say this, this is, there was a comment from the supposed Libertarian Party and their 5 followers that that we were anti-capitalists, and maybe that's where her comment of new right comes from. But when you look at nuclear, it's the furthest thing from capitalism. Because of the regulation required to keep it safe, it is so regulated that it's expensive. And because it's expensive, it's not what the free market is going to choose for its energy source. That's going to be something that's both reliable and affordable, and that would be coal. And so also along these lines, we can take 3 examples from the current discussions in Wyoming about nuclear. We got TerraPower down in Kemmerer. That experiment is 50% funded by the federal government. The other 50% is Bill Gates, who knows how to get federal funds. So it may be more than 50% funded by the federal government. Radiant, their first 5 years worth of customers are the federal government. All of the products they're going to produce are going to be for the federal government.
$1
at least
billion.
for the first 5 years of their product capabilities. And then BWXT, well, another nuclear company that cannot do anything without federal approval. So I would say that we're just the opposite by pumping the brakes on this nuclear discussion. We're just the opposite of anti-capitalist. We're anti-federal government growing in Wyoming.
Well,
And,
that's just the point that I was about to make, John, is that when you're talking about the free market, I mean, in all respects, you want as least government, the least amount of government involvement as possible. And when you have an industry like nuclear or solar panels or windmills that are heavily subsidized, I mean, it's the contradiction in their argument is baffling to me. That folks that are screaming about, oh, you're against the free market, you're against capitalism, are trying to support an industry that is almost entirely profitable only because of subsidies. And, one question that I haven't heard in this whole discussion, and well, I have heard it from you guys, is if this nuclear storage is so great and it's such a wonderful deal and it's going to provide all these opportunities and jobs for everybody, why aren't there any nuclear waste storage sites? Why aren't any other states running at this, trying to set one of these storage sites up? I mean, if it's so fantastic, you would think that everybody would be running for it. Now, interestingly enough, Representative Alaman, you did a poll, and it was brought up in both the Casper Star Tribune article, the Red Star, and it was mentioned in the Cow Pie. So why don't you just take a few minutes and tell us about that poll?
Okay, the poll was only a 7-hour poll. It was started at 9 o'clock Thursday morning. I wanted the results for my town hall on Thursday afternoon. So they gave me the results at 2:30 on Thursday. And at that time they had 113 results, and which is huge. And my key findings were people are somewhat aware of it coming in. 73% said they knew the state law. 25% said they didn't. Then when we look at supporting the storage of nuclear waste, my poll did not say in bar none, it said in Wyoming. It was 70% opposed it, but only 12.4% supported it.
Okay, now was this a push
hold
poll,
on
or
just a
was
second, Ken.
what's the other kind of? All right, so let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the roundtable discussion with the members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. We'll have more in just a second. Go fill up your coffee. Come back. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Before the break, we were talking, well, I was showing you a video that we recorded over the weekend, a conversation between members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus about what it means to be on the new right. And then the second part, or if they are on the new right, which they're not, that's a term that was used by the Cowpie. And then the second part of the discussion was all about all this nuclear business. And where we had stopped is Representative Alderman was talking about the poll that he commissioned that was mentioned in both the Cowpie article and in the Casper Star Tribune. And by the way, the results of that poll are on cowboystatepolitics.com right now. You can go read them for yourself. You can see what questions were asked, and it'll answer the kind of the ominous questions that were asked by the Cowpie and by the Casper Star Tribune. So let's go ahead and finish up the piece, and then we'll come back. I know I forget the other name of it, but was this a push poll?
You're gonna have to tell me what a push poll is.
Well, look, I think the question is, were the questions neutral or were they suggestive? And the push poll would be very suggestive.
They were very neutral for the fact I'm not in this to find out and make an agenda for myself. I want to know what the actual people in my district think. So I wanted it neutral. And this poll was very neutral. Not one time did we mention, bar none, in the poll. It was talking about Wyoming.
Okay.
Was there anything in your poll that suggested that nuclear is bad?
No.
That would make it pretty neutral.
And I have given David permission to put the poll and the poll results on his website. So anybody who's listening to this, if they want to see that this was a neutral poll, they can go onto his website and look if he does post it.
And I'll go ahead and put it at cowboystatepolitics.com. Representative Knapp, you've been kind of quiet. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have 2 points, I think, because I sit on the Minerals Committee, but it's not just minerals, it's also Economic Development Committee, right? So when we look at this, nuclear energy is a chain. It's a chain of supply, it's a chain of fabrication, manufacturing, the power itself, and then ultimately the waste. So Wyoming can play a role, and I believe it should, in that supply chain. And that is, we have uranium we can mine. We've done that before, and we can continue to do so to in effort, support Trump's defense rebuilding, if it were. And for the AI and data, we can do manufacturing. We have some of the best fabrication in the world. We have fabrication that does work for NASA. However, what we have found is those fabrication companies have bid before on nuclear projects and not been accepted because of either union ties, their qualifications for nuclear, or they're just not big enough. And so we've seen that before, and that is a fear going forward as well. The part that we draw the line on is waste. And I would say that when it comes to the argument or the debate of waste, we actually, from the other side, get a acknowledgement that waste is a challenge, that there are no necessarily good answers for waste, that technology has been on the energy side of it, but not the waste side of it. So it's not a matter of, you start to hear terms like fear mongering, fake facts, those types of things. Boogeymen is a good one that comes up. Those are not debate type of facts that you can necessarily pin down. The facts that we bring are Hanford, a site where they have had $50 billion of cleanup so far. Is projected to be to the year 2100, with a cleanup of over $600 billion estimated. And interesting enough, that cleanup is being done by BWXT, which is a company that is looking at Wyoming. And they have not batted an eye with those figures. They confirm those figures. So all over the country, it's upwards of $1 trillion now that is estimated for sites across the country. So it's not as if we're using facts that don't exist or conjecture, providing conjecture. So for me, I've always akined it to going to a car dealership. And if all you hear from is your car sales rep, chances are you're going to leave buying a car. We want the Carfax. So in our committee, we've heard from all the proponents. We've heard from the legislators promoting the bills. We've heard from the lobbyists. We've heard from the companies that want to bring this. They negate the nuclear waste piece. They never answer it. And so we've heard from the NRC about waste. We want to hear from the Texas Attorney General's office. We want to hear from Hanford. We want to hear from those sites that can give us at least an opportunity to have a clear picture, have transparency so that the public can decide, is this something that is worth the risk? Because the money that you bring in, even bringing in nuclear waste and storing it, I think the federal government has between 400 and 600 million a year that they spread out over the 90 some sites that are locally storing waste. No matter what you brought in does not equal the billions and billions and billions of dollars it costs if there's cleanup needed. So that's one area of the nuclear chain that we've said that's probably not worth our investment and probably not worth the risk.
All right, now let me ask you kind of an obtuse question, because we started this conversation talking about the assertions that you guys are the new right, that you're some sort of anti-capitalist. So my question is, I would consider all of you guys conservatives. In your mind, how does your conservatism play into your thoughts about nuclear waste, nuclear storage sites, and whomever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
I'll try to answer that, but if I may at the end, I'd like to come back to finish responding to Ken's comments about racism.
Sure.
And the new right. But my experience is probably a little different because I had a Navy career. As an officer, I was very familiar with the nuclear side of the Navy. I didn't work in that area, but I was very familiar with it. And so I have a level of experience with what I would consider fairly safe nuclear program. I will tell you, I don't trust the federal government to run a both safe and effective or efficient nuclear program. What happened in the Navy is they gave control to one man, and that one man cared enough about the nuclear program in the Navy that he managed it for safety and for efficiency in a very good way. That was Admiral Rickover. And that's just uncommon in the military to allow one person to control an entire program in a military that became huge. I mean, every submarine
Everything now
was nuclear, every aircraft carrier was nuclear, and many destroyers were nuclear under his time. And he selected every single officer that came into that program, had to interview with him. He controlled and kept his thumb on everything from what kind of equipment was purchased to who was operating the equipment. And we just don't have that in the federal government, where the administration has potential changing every 4 years. And, if you're going to keep this stuff safe, you need to keep that kind of thing in mind. And the discussion earlier was about, about regulation. It's necessary. And so it's going to be heavily regulated, making it cost prohibitive. Now we're talking about a lack of efficiency. It's doomed before it even starts. I like the ideas. I've operated around nuclear quite a bit. I think it can be safe, but it requires something far beyond what our federal government is prepared to do, because right now it's far too political at the federal level, and that's why we've been building windmills like crazy and solar panels and things that just make no sense in a free market society. So with that, I'd like to, if I may, just go back and talk about the racism issue, because we, the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, get called racist all the time. And so I guess I would start by asking the question, well, whose definition of racist? Because that is changing on a moment by moment basis. But I would ask this question seriously. For which of our good deeds are we being condemned? Because these are the things that they call us racist for, because we support closed borders. Is that racist? We're the only nation that really doesn't have closed borders, and we should. Is it because we want to protect women's spaces from men invading them? I don't think so, and I don't think the people of Wyoming would agree with that being a racist move. Or is it ensuring that only Wyoming citizens vote in Wyoming elections? Those are the kind of things that we believe that those are just common sense things. They're not racist. They apply to every race. But these are the kind of things we're attacked for and labeled as racist. So if Claire McFarland were attempting to call us the new right based on a racist claim, I think we're the furthest thing from that.
Ken?
Yeah, I completely agree, John. I think that was very well said. The things like you mentioned, the border. My own sister likes to call me racist because I'm trying to block the border, overlooking the fact that the core of what I'm conservative about is trying to conserve the culture that we have that is rooted in the rule of law and the rule of respect for law. And if we throw those things out, and we've had the discussion, David and I have had several times on the air, then we have nothing. And if there's a problem with the law, fine, let's change the law. Let's make it a little bit easier to work with, a little bit more flexible, whatever it is you think that needs to be done. Let's do that. Let's don't just simply shove the law aside and say it makes no sense. And that's what conservative means to me. We're trying to preserve the culture of the greatest nation on the face, led to more prosperity and more freedom, saved more lives, turned more people free than any and everybody else combined.
And I would point out too that as conservatives, one of our main goals is transparency. It allows people to decide once they can see the whole picture. The other side continues to defray that, and that's a good instance is between illegals and immigration. We have an immigration policy in the U.S. It invites up to 2 million people per year to come to America in the right way by applying, by going through the process. And they try to negate that as if we have no immigration policy at all, and that all of this is because of that. It's a continued confusion, whether it's the nuclear debate, by including all nuclear energy into the conversation instead of nuclear waste, which we're dealing with, by talking about spent fuel versus waste. Right now, they're talking about this fuel that can be recycled. Well, triso fuel, which is what we're talking about now with both Radiant and BWXT, at this point in time, cannot be recycled effectively and economically. But they like to mix those terms so that it continues to confuse people. That particular fuel also burns at a higher isotope, so it creates, it's enriched up to 19.72 versus 2.5 to 5% in normal commercial plants right now. So putting that in a cask that we've always put it in, again, we don't know what's going to happen in 40 years or 50 years or 100 years with that elevated amount of radiation isotope that is bombarding that concrete and steel. So once you start getting into the actual aspects of it and understanding all the different nuances in waste, then you can start to make these decisions. But the more they can create it to be generic and to be anti-capitalist, we're all business owners as well. We see things from a 30,000-foot view. And that's our job as legislators as well, too. We don't want to get bogged down in a bill-to-bill type argument. We want to look at these as policies, understand those policies, understand the dozens of bills that would go with those policies before we just jump into the river and then wonder why we get wet later.
What about you, Bill?
Over this summer, I've been hearing all summer long in both telephone calls and at my town halls that if this comes to bar none, I'm selling my house. Last week I checked. There was one house for sale in bar none. This morning I checked and there's 10. So those people are not just saying stuff, they're meaning it. And we're going to be losing our young kids, and this Radiant has split the community of bar none in half. And I hate to see that.
Fair enough. Well, guys, we pretty much run out of time. Do you have any thoughts before we wrap things up? All right. Well, Agent 29.
I'm happy. I want to thank you guys for being on here and doing this on short notice, coming out on a Sunday afternoon, getting this recorded. So thank you guys for everything you do.
Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. Make sure you keep me informed how this whole nuclear thing and how many times you're called all sorts of different names.
I would make one comment. There is the upcoming meeting for the Minerals Committee is this Tuesday and Wednesday in Casper. And so I would encourage people to tune in because there will be more discussion, more facts about waste. And I think it's important for people to tune in.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right.
Thank
Well, that was our panel discussion with the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. And like two points that I wanted to make with it is, one, to show that the cow pie is at it again and that they found a new name to call conservatives or members of the Freedom Caucus. And one of the funnier parts of that piece is that they used posts from somebody, Representative Nina Weber, who is not a member of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, and tried to say, well, they vote the same a lot. So, she's a member of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. Well, Representative Mike Yin votes with Republicans way more than some of the Republicans do, believe it or not. And that's another point that I can't wait to bring up on the program, Ken, is the WYO vote results. I'm not quite ready to talk about those on the program yet, but it's coming. So, Agent 29, any thoughts about our roundtable discussion, nuclear energy? I know since we did the interview, you've had a chance to sit down with a couple of different folks. Any thoughts?
No, I was very appreciative, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the show, sat down with a representative and from this agency or this company, and also apparently have an opportunity to sit down with some of their scientists, some of their technical people, and ask some questions. So I would appreciate those who would be detractors, as you kind of started out with too. We're not approaching this from just an ignorant knee-jerk reaction. We're asking very good questions. We're asking, you could tell from the things that Chris said that he's pretty up on what's happening.
Yeah, I can't wait to go back and listen to the Minerals Committee,
Yeah.
which is happening right
as
now.
we speak. Yeah. So I would ask, let's just put the brakes on the name calling and that all the other stuff, and let's approach this realistically. But bear in mind, the Wyoming public does not want this.
Well, and I think that there's evidence to that. Before we played the roundtable, I mentioned that there's a lot of informal polls that are on social media. So, okay, admittedly, it's social media. They're informal, not official in any way. But the response on them is overwhelmingly against any of this. Now, a lot of that, I think, comes from just your knee-jerk reaction to nuclear waste, which is, we're talking about a waste storage facility, so I don't think that it's entirely off the mark. But, from the very beginning, no pun intended, nuclear waste is kind of a toxic subject if you're a politician. And there are a lot of people online, as I mentioned at the top of the program, that generally speaking, we agree on a whole bunch of other stuff. I saw a comment, actually, Ken, I think you read it to me before the show, that I am never going to forgive the Wyoming Freedom Caucus if they tank this opportunity. Well, frankly, my friends, I've had a lot of opportunities with my business, what you would classify as opportunities, and I looked at them and said, there is no way that I can support that. I know that you want to throw a whole bunch of money at this, and you want me to do all of these things, and certainly that's an opportunity, but there's no way that it's going to succeed. And in this case, even representatives from BWXT and Radiant, they have openly admitted to a lot of the challenges to the Minerals Committee. You heard Representative Knapp say, look, they've said it, that there are almost $1 trillion worth of cleanup needed at various sites around the country. And let's just be really clear. Right now, if you have a nuclear waste or a nuclear facility, a power plant, it's federal law that you have to store the spent fuel rods or the waste on site. And so while, yes, there are storage facilities across the country, those are at nuclear sites right now. We're not talking about that. We're talking about creating a waste storage facility separate and apart from these nuclear plants. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's like the bonding issues. What happens if the company that is responsible for this disappears? Normally, when you're talking about something that might have a 10, 20, 40-year cleanup or something, but in this case, where we're talking nuclear and we're talking literally thousands of years perhaps, that's a little bit different thing. And I'm not saying that we don't need to advance nuclear power. I happen to be pro-nuclear power. I just think there are some things that we need to iron out. And I'll say this one more time, the Wyoming people need to be confident that their questions are answered, that we're moving ahead responsibly. And as it stands right now, they are not convinced.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to look at your email inbox and just see how many comments you have from people saying, don't do this. Now, again, I'm not against nuclear power either, but we're dealing with something that you have to be sure about what it is that you're doing. And I think that the only information we have on, just take these storage casks. The research that I did before this roundtable and before a program last week is, as far as we can tell, they're only good for 40 or 50 years. Okay, well, that's 40 or 50 years, and many of us won't be around after that. But that doesn't get us out of the responsibility of making sure that this stuff is not going anywhere. So 40 or 50 years is nothing in comparison with the half-life of plutonium. Okay, so all you got to do, get online, search what is the half-life of plutonium, what is the half-life of nuclear isotopes, and you'll find that it's a lot more than 40 or 50 years. So at the very least, if you're in favor of this, prove what you're saying is true. Don't tell me that, oh, this is a great opportunity, that this could be great for Wyoming, if you don't have all of the facts. Because if you don't have all of the facts, what I'm going to find out later is it is not going to be great for Wyoming because you didn't know what the hell you were doing.
I've been saying often on rather tongue-in-cheek, this is a great opportunity for Elon Musk and SpaceX.
Yeah.
Let's load this stuff on rockets and shoot it out beyond Jupiter. And everybody says, well, we could crash it on the moon. We crash it. No, just let it keep going.
Just put it out.
Like V'ger.
Hey, by the way, there's a lot of Star Trek episodes where they run into like nuclear waste that's been jettisoned. I don't know if that's a good idea either. I guess what I'm getting at is we don't have enough information. And if it's my own personal business, and by the way, government business, or that is state business, should be no different than the way you run your personal household, right? If you wouldn't specifically do that without all of the information, without being aware of all of the implications, then you probably shouldn't do it at the state level either. And you know, it's this is one of those that I think that we need to have a real sober discussion about this. And reading some of the comments, I think it's pretty obvious that some people, not mentioning any names, were not entirely sober when they were commenting online. I'm just saying. I mean, you just read some of this crap and you're like, you aren't even thinking clearly about this. It's just absolutely amazing. All right. So coming up on the program, I've got a follow-up interview from the discussion we had with former Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Kate Fox. Now, during the interview, and if you missed it, you need to go back and listen to it, because there were a number of things that the former Chief Justice said that were pretty interesting. Well, we wanted to get the perspective from a lawyer. And as I might have told you before on the program, conservative lawyers in Wyoming are kind of in short supply for a number of reasons. That was one of the things I kind of alluded to in talking with Justice Fox. So we invited a Sheridan attorney, Seth Shumaker. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. We're going to ask him when he walks in the studio. But we're going to have a conversation with him. We're going to ask him the same questions that I asked former Chief Justice Kate Fox, and we're just going to get his take on all of it, because I bet he's going to have a little bit different perspective. So we'll have that discussion with Seth Shumaker when we come back. Also, because I've got a couple minutes before the top of the hour break, let me just give you kind of a roadmap of what's going on. Tomorrow on the show, I have an interview with a friend of mine. His name is Sean Meehan. And he runs an outfit. I think it's called Preserve the Constitution, Protect the Constitution, something like that. But he's very much opposed to the Convention of States, and kind of a kindred spirit to me in that area. So we're going to have him on the program, and it's been a while since we've talked the stupid Convention of States. So we're going to do a segment about that tomorrow. And then on Thursday, hold on. On Thursday, we're going to have an interview with Speaker of the House, Chip Diamond. He's going to be joining us via Zoom. I'm assuming probably from inside his tractor. If you know anything about Chippy, he's almost always in his tractor when he does interviews. And so we'll do that on Thursday. So lots coming on the program. When we come back, Mr. Seth Shumaker.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics, live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. I don't know, okay, maybe not that much, but you can pretty much find the program anywhere. You can listen to the live program every Tuesday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. And then don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast, which is published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And you can find that like anywhere that you get your podcasts, or just ask Gail Simmons. I mean, I'm pretty sure that she knows exactly where to find it. By the way, if you didn't read her piece over the weekend, you really need to. The funniest part about that dang thing is she says, you know, you should, if you think this is a democracy, you should really read what our founders said. I agree. You should read them because they didn't think this was a democracy at all. Anyway, go listen to the podcast I published yesterday on the program. I think it's wonderfully fun. There's some sound bites in there from the very first interview on Cowboy State Politics. By the way, that was with Gail Simmons. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time, it's not good. In fact, it's not anywhere close to good. There's a reason why you have to really kind of work to find it. It is there if you go to the podcast website. But anyway, Gail Simmons yesterday on the podcast. Well, I'd like to welcome into the studio Seth Shumaker. Now, Seth is an attorney in Sheridan. Welcome to the program, Seth.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, first thing you always get hit with on this show is just take a minute or two and tell my viewers about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing law for about 34 years. I practiced in Missouri for about 20 years, and then about 10 years ago I came out here. My mother's from Red Lodge. She grew up in the Bear Creek.
I was just there, not that long ago.
Yeah, she grew up in Bear Creek, a suburb, and my parents met in Red Lodge. They got married there. My dad was from Missouri, and after they got married, they went back to Missouri. Anyway, Dad passed away in the mid-'90s, and my mother came out here and bought the Branding Iron Restaurant in Dayton, and she owned that for about 12 years, and then she's living in Billings now, and I live with my wife in Dayton, and we have a 20-year-old son named Reagan.
Ah,
yep.
I like him already.
Yeah, he spells it the same way, and he's going to be a junior at UW this year.
All right, great. Well, you are an attorney, so what kind of law do you practice?
I do a lot of things. I do bankruptcies. I do everything from exploding snowmobiles to exploding relationships. So I've covered. I've noticed that a general practice seems to be my thing. I don't like to get stuck in any one
area of the law. I like to keep it interesting by doing a bunch of different things, but I really like going to the courtroom,
Yeah.
and that's something that a lot of attorneys are trying to get away from, and so, but I like it. It breaks
Excellent.
up the monotony.
Well, if you hang around this show, we try not to have any monotony. In fact, I don't think there is.
I can't imagine.
No, there's way too much bullcrap to talk about. All right, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is we just finished a discussion with former Chief Justice Kate Fox, and most of it we talked about the judicial nominating process. And being a lawyer in Wyoming, I'm sure you have some thoughts about that. So first, why don't you just give me your knee-jerk gut reaction to how we pick judges?
Well, I know that the whole purpose behind a Missouri plan, or even a modified version of the Missouri plan, is supposed to minimize or get the politics completely out of the
bullcrap.
Yeah, the picking of these judges. But quite frankly, like we discussed before we went on the air, you're not going to get politics totally out of the process. I mean, you have to realize that when you see certain people showing up on the final three for the governor to pick from that might have served in his administration.
Maybe, kind of.
And so what are the chances, that consistently comes up? I'm not saying that any of those picks that the governor's made are bad folks or that they're bad choices, but to say that system, the selection process, is void of politics.
Yeah.
Let's kind of not go there.
Well, and that's exactly right. And I didn't bring it up with the Chief Justice, but one of the things that was going through my head was during the Harriet Hageman's first election to the House of Representatives, there was a letter sent out by 47 Wyoming attorneys and judges and members of the Wyoming Bar Administration, Association, that on the letter it said Wyoming Bar. And it was very, very pro-Cheney, anti-Trump. I mean, it was a crazy letter. So don't tell me that the Wyoming Bar Association is apolitical. In fact, I don't think that they are.
Well, I'm probably the black sheep in this profession when it comes to the political thought amongst the bar members. I've never really been able to reconcile how the more education you get in becoming an attorney, especially 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of law school, that you somehow become less literate in the way that the world works. And so my profession is fraught and overrun with those of the left-wing persuasion, and I just never have understood why that is the case. Because I listened to Rush Limbaugh for years, and God bless him, I miss him terribly. But
Me too.
He was the mayor of Reelville, and I always thought that I was a citizen of that town, Reelville. And it's just not the way the world works. You can't. We've devolved our political speech to personal attacks and personal destruction. We cannot engage in a rational debate about anything. It's absolute tribalism. People split up into different groups, and it's personal attacks. That's all it is. There's no logic. There's no rationale. And I think it goes, this whole system of selecting judges and things. And by the way, we've got really good judges in this state. I think Judge Finn is one of the finest individuals I've ever met. I think his successor, Miss Phillips, she has been an outstanding job in that. And you've got a lot of committed professionals in the clerk's offices, the county attorney's offices, that really are dedicated to doing, I think, the right thing. But I think the thing that people need to understand is you're never going to get rid of the politics in this selection process.
Well, as Alan Simpson said, in Wyoming, everything is politics. Except for politics, that's personal. Yeah. And it's, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's Alan Simpson always had a little bit of humor, but I think that what he said is absolutely correct. That in everything we do, there are politics. And unfortunately, I really wish that the law was the one place that you didn't have politics. But I think when you look at, just as an example, I broke a story. Oh man, Ken, how long ago was it that we did the Attorney General not prosecuting every election case?
I couldn't even tell you, but
that was a long time ago.
I think we hit it several times, though.
Well, all right. Well, I broke a story where every single election complaint, and there were 16 of them, I think, that had been forwarded from the Secretary of State to the Attorney General's office, and admittedly of varying severity. I mean, some of them were kind of they were just whining on a couple of them, but there were more. There was more than one that was a pretty serious complaint. Not a single one of them was investigated. All of them were in the Attorney General's office, and you can't convince me that that wasn't political. I mean, it's just I can't believe it.
Well, to not investigate any of them is concerning, I think. I mean, you're charged as an attorney general with upholding the law, especially election laws. Those are important things. You got to protect the integrity of these elections. We've had too many people question these elections, and I think rightfully so in a lot of cases, especially on a federal level here a few years ago.
Yeah.
Anyone who thinks that there wasn't some kind of chicanery going on in
That's a good word.
that federal.
Write that down, Ken.
Yes, chicanery.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you at least, if you were in the position of Bridget Hill, wouldn't you at least go through the motions and say, I've looked into this, or she could put herself into a trap by doing that?
Well, I guess you could go through the motions, but how meaningful is that even? Prosecutors have a lot of discretion. They can pick and choose who to charge with what, if anything. And they then have that discretion that carries through to disposition.
Sure.
Whether to go to trial or not, a lot of times. Depends on what a prosecutor will do, including the Attorney General. But to not investigate any of them, I don't know. I'd like to hear a justification for that.
Now, one of them, and I don't, yeah, you were probably around for the Cyrus Western, Bill Novotny, where they went after some private citizens, put out political mailers.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that one, by the way, if you haven't read the sheriff or Boot Hill's report on that, that is some wonderful reading. I mean, it's actually kind of funny in some cases. But in that one, I mean, I think an honest view of it is the Sheridan County Sheriff's Department had those two guys dead to rights. I mean, it was pretty clear when you read Boot Hill's report that, all right, it's not proven. I mean, you're innocent until proven guilty, but pretty damning when you read it. And that's one of those that kind of, it just didn't get looked into at all. All right, so let's get back on topic. Judicial nominating. We know the process is political. Pretty hard to get politics out of it. So you got any thoughts on what we would do instead?
Well, I think in this state you could certainly look at some version of like the federal process, but you'd have to take into consideration the idea that, the legislature in Wyoming only meets for a couple of months out of the year.
Right.
And these openings on the judiciary come up,
all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And that's especially been the case in the last 8 years, I've noticed here. Been a big turnover on the bench. And so you'd have to have a standing committee, I guess, to do confirmations through the Senate if that was the process you wanted to go through. But that's political as well. I mean,
well, yeah, and that's the point that Kate Fox brought up. She said, look at what these hearings have turned into. And I mean, there's a couple of good examples. Kavanaugh, that one was, that was something else. And then you go all the way back to Clarence Thomas, where
Right.
Joe Biden tried to do him.
I think that's where that all started, was Clarence Thomas. One of the only great things I thought Jack Danforth did was stand by Clarence Thomas during that process.
Well, and then there's Robert Bork. I mean, where
Absolutely.
the term came from, getting borked.
Yep, I guess that's right. He was before even Thomas. Yeah, like I said, it's about personal assassination and do anything and everything, even lie, put up perjured testimony to try to defeat a guy that you think is more conservative and not going to pack the water for you politically. And that's a horrible thing for this republic.
I just learned something. I thought that the term borked came from the Swedish chef.
No. All right. So I guess the next question I have here, and again, this is one that, I asked Chief Justice Fox. We spoke briefly about the Attorney General's office. And it's my opinion, and I think that there's a lot of evidence to back this up, that it's been highly political. So what are your thoughts, or if you have any, on electing an Attorney General?
Well, I think that's certainly something that other states have done. It's something that, at the same time, you want to think that the governor wants to pick his own attorney to and people have that right to choose their own attorney if they want to do that. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's worked in several states. It's commonplace for attorney generals to be elected and run on a partisan ticket and raise funds, and then that brings up the issue of how much influence are you going to allow in from foreign sources and out-of-state monies, and what effect that has on the whole process. You can devise whatever plan you want or design a program to try to get the politics completely out of this system, which I don't think you can. But it all comes down to having really good people. I think wanting to do a job, wanting to do it right, wanting to keep their own personal biases out of a decision when they're presented with a certain set of facts in the law. And that's all the judge is there to do. You're lucky, even though people criticize the system right now that you have in selecting judges, that you have really good judges committed to that, I think. They're just some really outstanding people, not only on the bench, but in the bar as well. And though a lot of them I don't agree with politically, I think in their way, in their perception, they're doing the right thing the right way. But there's always exceptions to that rule, and there's always going to be people, whether it's on the bench or in the bar, that are going to let their own political biases sway the way they conduct themselves. And if there's a way to stop that, yeah, let's look at it. But I don't know that you're ever going to get there.
One of the decisions that really impressed me was how Darcy Phillips handled the vacancy on the Sheridan County Commission. That one I didn't know how it was going to go. I don't personally know Judge Phillips, but I followed that thing and did several programs on it. And what amazed me at the end is there was no politics in her decision. She just said, look, here's what the law says. Here's what you guys didn't do. And so we're just going to go with what the law said. And I really appreciated that, because I think that, there's a lot of decisions that we could criticize one way or another. And maybe all of them are inherently political, but at the very least, you hope that a judge's decision, they based it on the law and not on politics.
And one of the many things I'm impressed with Judge Phillips is that she actually looks at the file and reads the law, and she'll do her own research on the law, and then she makes a decision based on that. And I told her one time when we were on a break, I said, it looks like to me before you come out here, you actually look at a file and you sometimes
you actually read.
Yeah, and you read the file and you do some research. And she says, I do. And I said, you need to understand that in some of my cases, that puts me at a distinct disadvantage.
I just wanted to say, I greatly appreciate your comments about Judge Fenn. I happened to be involved in several cases where he was the judge, and I found him to be very thoughtful, very fair, and appreciated that. And I don't know that you and I have talked about this, but one of the bills I got passed was related to the case that you helped my family with. And I also spent quite a bit of time with Judge Phillips, and she was very helpful in kind of the approach and giving me some of the background. And so I think they're very good people, but as we've said, you're not going to get the politics purged.
All right, well, let's kind of move to a different topic. And I don't know if you've had any experience in this, but I'm just going to ask you. We've seen a lot of threats to different members of the judiciary, mostly judges. We had the guy that wanted to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh. Chief Justice Fox mentioned a couple of what I consider to be pretty serious threats against the Wyoming Supreme Court and against other judges. So as an attorney, have you noticed any threats to either lawyers or, obviously we have the judges, but have you noticed an increase in any threats to you or, any of your colleagues?
I don't know. It's been really threats. There's a certain attitude that I've noticed since COVID. I think that brought out the worst in some people afterwards. And, there's a lot of mental illness in this world. And people that do things like threatening judges, threatening law enforcement or whoever.
Clearly not in their right mind.
Well, they're not. And do you think that enhancement of a punishment is going to stop somebody that's so unbalanced that they would consider doing something like that? I don't think
No.
more laws are not the answer. Perhaps more mental health treatment for folks, but I've noticed that people are a little less empathetic with others these days, and I think it kind of started with COVID and people being locked down and isolated from one another. It really brought the worst out in a lot of people, and I think we're still dealing with a lot of that. But as far as threats to the bench or judiciary or whomever, anytime you're in a position of authority, you're going to offend some people. County attorneys, I think, would be prime targets for those kinds of threats because they get to decide who gets charged with what, if anything.
Right.
And when they do, they offend not only the defendant, but the defendant's family, and then probably the victim before it's over because the victim and the victim's family doesn't like the disposition of how it turned out and what the judge sentenced the defendant to if that person's found guilty. So I just think it comes down to, if you're willing to step up and serve in those positions, you got to be ready and prepared and not be fearful of people who may threaten you in doing your job. And as long as you're doing the right thing, I wouldn't worry about the consequences of it. But there are always going to be people out there who not only question authority, but threaten authority. And that's a test to the person who's sitting in that position being threatened. And you got to be ready and able to put up with it.
Well, and I think that the three of us would probably agree that the best prevention to any sort of threat is carrying one of these. I mean, take care of your own stuff. But my next question is, we know that Justice Fox was pretty clear about some of the threats to some members of the Wyoming judiciary, some of them pretty credible. She didn't go into one that happened to her personally, but they caught a guy at her house. That's pretty scary. So the next question is, what do we do about it? I mean, clearly we can't have people, openly threatening judges. I mean, what do you do about that? Do you prosecute them for making the threat? Do you just increase security at the courthouse? What do we do?
There are several things you can do. I know she spoke about all the potential entrances to all the courthouses in the state, and now some are really good about containing entrances and others not so much, including Sheridan counties. There's a lot of point of entries there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, you can step up security. I know I've been in courthouses where they actually have metal detectors for people to walk through, but they're not plugged in and nobody uses them unless it's a jury trial. Yeah, unless it's a jury trial, they don't turn them on. They don't use them. So there are probably lots of times when people could just walk in, even though Buffalo's a fairly secured courthouse because of its, limited number of access points. But if you don't use metal detectors except for a trial, it's a soft target. And so, you prosecute those people that threaten judges. You step up security when there's been a threat. But again, it's about a mental health issue more than anything. And we've got to come to grips with that and deal with it effectively. And we've not done such a good job of that.
I would agree with you.
Yeah. Just as a little aside, I had an appointment with Chief Justice Fox, and while I was down in Cheyenne, and I go into the Supreme Court building, and there's the metal detectors there, which reminded me, so I run back out to the truck, stash that, and then I come back in, and there's nobody around at all.
Yeah.
And the metal detector sits right in front of the doors, but you just walk around it.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's security.
Well, and that's what, Seth, what you were talking about in Buffalo. I mean, I've been in that courthouse a lot, just doing different research on cases. And you walk in, and there's 2 metal detectors, I think, there with a little conveyor. And I, like you, Agent 29, I've almost always got my pistol on me. And lots of times I've been walking up to the door and been like, oh, crap. Okay, walk back to the car. Take the gun off, take whatever knife I've got on me, leave it in the car. And then you walk in, and there's nobody there. And, if you wanted to, you could walk right around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. So last question. I know that we talked about elected attorney generals and, maybe confirming some justices. But I didn't ask you the question about how you would reform, if that's needed, the judicial nominating process. Okay, so what I mean by that is on the committee, you've got members of the Bar Association, you've got the Chief Justice, who, okay, she only votes when there's a tie, and then you've got some appointees by the governor. Okay, so inherently, that's political. So what changes would you make there? Do you think that there's like some community, some way that the community can nominate a couple people to sit on this, or?
Well, you could do it that way. I mean, it's but what kind of people are you going to get? A lot of people are so disengaged in politics, or try to be, and they're busy about paying their rent. They're busy going to work and doing their thing, and that's probably the last thing they want to get involved in. Because people abhor politics, even though politics controls much of what everybody does in a daily activity. But to change it, I always kind of like the federal system in the sense that you get it out in the open what the politics are involved in this. The governor in such a case would nominate somebody, and then you'd have an open debate and interview in a public forum of these people. And as long as it didn't get to the point of like what Judge Bork went through, or what Clarence Thomas went through, or what Brett Kavanaugh went through, you notice they're all Republican nominees who go through this. Strange. But anyway, that's a coincidence, I'm sure. But if you could do it like that, I think that would be the most open, honest forum you could have, really. You know, the Missouri plan came about in the early 70s because of a political boss with the same last name as Agent 29 here. I don't know that he's any relation.
Probably. There's a whole bunch of them running around, and they're pretty nefarious.
But what happened in Missouri with the Missouri plan is you have the same nominating committee that's made up of nominees by the governor, members of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. Not the most conservative group of boys I've ever met, or gals, and then the Insurance Defense Bar. And so what kind of process is that? And then I've seen governors make sure that they get the person they're going to nominate, or they're going to appoint on that committee, and to make that list of the last three. And they'll load it with two other people who are well qualified, who do a much better job probably, but that system has become loaded so that the governor can pick the person they want.
You know, and I guess to be fair, like not the Bridget Hill's nomination, but the one before, and I forgive me, I don't remember the justice's name, but the three candidates, one of them was Tim Stubson, old Stubby, I call him. And I thought for sure, I'm like, oh, this is a setup. Guess who's going to be the next Supreme Court justice? And to his credit, Governor Gordon didn't pick him. And so, you know, I think that we got to be calling balls and strikes when we talk about this. All right. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left. If people want to get a hold of you, Seth, how do they do that?
Well,
or if you want them to get a hold of you, I don't know.
Well, I might be getting some threats.
On this program? Nah.
Okay, good. Yeah, you can certainly check our website out at SheridanYoLaw@gmail.com or .com. And I'm right on Main Street here next to the YO Theater in the BMO Bank Building, Suite 103.
All right. Well, Seth, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, thank you. It's always good to talk.
We'll go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program.
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
This program is only going to continue to get stronger. Cowboy state politics is expanding at a rate that, frankly, I'm having a hard time keeping up with it. The Cowboy State Politics Podcast, Cowboy State Politics Live, and who knows, Agent 29, we may have something else up our sleeves. I mean, we've got a couple of months before the legislative session, so you never know what I've got under my hat or up my sleeve or whatever the case may be. Well, welcome back to the program, my friend. We just finished an interview with Seth Shumaker. I had to hesitate there a little bit. I couldn't remember if it was Schumacher or Shumaker. But interesting interview, and I really appreciate his perspective. You know, it's always nice to have an alternative viewpoint to an interview that you've done. But we'll continue to have Mr. Shumaker on the program whenever he's available, and there's something that we want him to weigh in on. We've got about 30 minutes left in the program, and this is on an entirely different note. But I found a piece, and it's on one of those tech blogs that that Rush Limbaugh convinced me to pay attention to. This one, the title is OpenAI's Big GPT-5 Upgrade for ChatGPT Set for August Release. Now, I've been doing a little bit of work with AI myself, trying to get up to speed, using it for research, and maybe a couple of other things. But in this piece, it very quietly says that artificial general intelligence has kind of been put on the back burner a little bit. Now, let me just explain what the difference is. So AI is, ChatGPT, right? It's a programmed, it's a computer program that is told to give certain responses to questions. And so when you type a question into ChatGPT, it'll show you, okay, I looked at, 39 websites and I found this many responses. So really, to some degree, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's only going to give you the response that it was programmed to give you. But there's no intelligence behind it. And when you use the term artificial intelligence, it's kind of a misnomer, right? It conjures up the idea that, all right, we're talking about data off of Star Trek. Or even actually a better example of that is and we talked about this last week, the ultimate computer on Star Trek. That it was programmed to do a specific thing, and it took that one directive to the nth degree and almost destroyed everybody. But it's still garbage in, garbage out is where we're at right now.
Unless you're HAL 9000.
Yes, now HAL 9000 totally. Well, I don't know though. Well, no, he did get some artificial general intelligence. What are you doing, Dave? But let's get to the piece here, and I quote. There was a time when OpenAI's ChatGPT-5 upgrade for ChatGPT was expected to bring AGI, So artificial general intelligence along with it. While AGI doesn't have a perfectly objective explanation, with AI firms constantly shifting the goalposts, it's essentially AI that's better than humans at most tasks. AI can approach any problem with a level of creativity similar to humans. That correlation between ChatGPT and AGI has died down significantly since the early days of 2024. The upgrade will be significant, but it probably won't be hyped up as AGI. Some hype already exists about the capabilities of ChatGPT, including intriguing teasers from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. Now, those signs suggest that the release of this new ChatGPT is imminent. Now, speculation aside, news reports indicate that OpenAI is indeed readying that upgrade, and it's going to happen in August. So the question is, one, are we close to what I would call the event horizon? Now, the event horizon, if you hadn't listened to the program before, is the point at which the artificial intelligence actually becomes intelligence. That is, becomes self-conscious, as opposed to what it is right now, which is a giant computer program. Now, I don't think that we're anywhere close to that. In fact, I question whether or not it's even possible. Now, there's a difference between that and a computer program making independent decisions, right? So you can program a computer to have a set number of responses and pick the most logical one, right? If you have programmed into it the rules of logic, you can say, okay, should I, go to the store? Well, logically, if you need food, yes, you should go to the store. But it's, again, all it is just response to stimuli, input versus output. That's a big difference between, general intelligence. And then when you look at the ethical considerations of AGI, I think that that's where our biggest problems are. And if you ask me, and maybe this is just me watching too much Star Trek, I think that at some point we're going to have an oops, and somebody's going to leave the door open, and the event horizon will be eclipsed before we even know it, or before we want it to be. Now the question is, should we do that? And I think that my answer to that is no. I don't think that we should, because I think that you're moving to a place where you've created something that can think more quickly, that can give responses more quickly, that can do more research than you can as a human being. And I think it's profoundly dangerous.
Yeah, I read an article just over the weekend. I should have sent it to you. So I'm sorry I didn't. But it was the idea that China and the United States should cooperatively work together on their AI programs.
Mm.
And for those of us that have a biblical background and a biblical worldview, that is the Tower of Babel. One language, all mankind working on a common goal, and knowing that every imagination of a man's heart is only evil continually. That won't end well. Should we do this AI thing? No.
Yeah, I think it's profoundly dangerous. But there again, I really think that this is going to be a case where somebody mistakenly leaves the door open and the cat gets out. And it's, there's lots of examples of those. And again, a lot of it comes from science fiction. But let's be perfectly honest. What was science fiction yesterday is now science fact today. And you just look at the 1960s version of Star Trek, right? Their communicators. Gee, what do those look like now? And maybe it's just the inspiration for the cell phone, but still.
Well, that's what you remember. Get Smart, perhaps.
Yeah, with the shoe phone.
Yeah,
absolutely. How could you forget Get Smart?
Yeah, but that's what happened to James Bond series. It's no longer that interesting because everybody has extraordinary technology.
Yeah.
You may not have as fancy or as fast a car with a parachute that, whatever. And the other thing is the sexism that was involved there is no longer popular. So that franchise is done. And for the, Gen Z or whatever you want to call yourself, for the younger folks, I don't think they can even comprehend why the James Bond thing, why some of the science fiction stuff back in the 50s and 60s carried the weight to it and the imagination that was there. Even Lost in Space, you know,
Sure.
Danger, Will Robinson. Man, that was fascinating when we were kids, and now it's like, oh, this is so cheesy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I were talking about this last week that, shows that we watched when we were kids were so cool. And then you try to watch them now and you're like, God, I can't, I feel kind of dumb that I actually watched this. Ken says, except for Bullwinkle. And, here's another thing, too. That I think that we need to talk about our education system here. Because when I was in school, and certainly when you were in school, Agent 29, if you even went to school, can you even read? I mean,
I've been known to read, especially if there are lots of pictures.
Yes. I only read it for the articles. But what I'm getting to is that when I was in school, like there was some mandatory reading of great works. And, some of it was elective courses. But what I'm talking about is philosophy, some great works of literature. When I was in school, though we didn't have to read 1984, we did read Fahrenheit 451. I mean, like really instructive books of admittedly fiction, but very instructive for where we're at right now.
There's another one that a classic is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And it actually has a lot to do with the very same thing we're talking about now, about a sentient being that was created, in effect, by putting parts together. And I remember having to read, for an English course, having to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I thought, this is going to be dumb. I don't want to read the typical Frankenstein. And I got into that. I was fascinated with it and all of the psychological things that were going on and the emotions, and it was a terrific ride.
Well, and what I'm getting to here is I don't think in our education system that we are asking students to read works in philosophic ethics or ethical philosophy, or however you want to put that. I don't know that those questions are being asked of students, and I don't think if you've not been exposed to any of that, I don't think that those considerations really play into it. I mean, the big question is, like I said before, should we do this?
I think the way that you can tell that comes out when you talk to a lot of young people, and they have the impression that whatever is happening now is unlike what has ever gone before. And technologically, yes, there are some aspects that are there, but the human condition never changes. God laid that out there. He said, there's nothing new under the sun. And all of these thinks that you can think, like Dr. Seuss, the thinks that you can think. People don't think anymore. You go back and you read Alexander Campbell. You go back and you read the founding fathers of the United States, and the thoughts and the training.
Like Gail Simmons not reading the founding fathers.
Yeah, and she's considered some sort of an academic at this point. Academically what? I don't know. But we realize that critical thought, that understanding the classical concepts of how the world works and how people work, and we have lost those things. Now, my wife has this library next door, which I'm looking forward to.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah,
we need to get her on the program.
We do, and I'm looking forward to bringing it through there. But it's very easy for her to find good classic books because the libraries now don't use them. If something hadn't been checked out in a year or two, they flush it. And to me, how do you know if a book is any good until it's been out there for 100 years? How do you know if a containment cask is any good until it's been out there for 1,000 years?
Exactly.
You just keep tying things together.
Well, and if you look at, one of the great, in my mind, one of the greatest losses in history was the burning of the library at Alexandria. Imagine what went up in smoke there that we'll never know. I mean, a lot of the great libraries in history. And by the way, and this is, I haven't talked about this on the program before, but one of my favorite things about going to Regis University was the library. The fourth floor of the library was locked, and the only way that you could get in there is with your advisor, and in some cases a priest. Because, I mean, Regis is a Jesuit institution. But the fourth floor of the library, that's where all of the really old books were. And I only got in there one time, but you walk in there, and you're talking books that are not 100 years old. They're hundreds of years old, and in some cases, older than that. And the ability to get, if you're researching something, though I didn't have to do this, but if you're researching something and you couldn't find the right book, well, they could always call the Vatican and get an interlibrary loan. I mean, but just think about the books, the knowledge, the writings, the conversations that you could get in just on that floor of the library. And I wonder if we're instilling in our students the curiosity to look for those things.
That's a whole nother question. So this is just kind of a little story on the side. My
Oh,
dad,
Lord, here we go. Do I have enough coffee for this?
yeah,
No.
probably. My dad used to teach at Tulane University, and one time I was there visiting the campus, and we went through the library, and I noticed the library was really not, it was not laid out very well. It was kind of, we got stuff over here, we got stuff over here. You really had to have some guidance to get through there.
Maybe that was on purpose.
Well, no.
Okay.
They had intended to build a brand new library, and they built it, and they began to bring the books in, and the foundation began to settle.
Oh, no.
And when they got into the investigation, they discovered that whatever brilliant engineers they had not calculated into the footers the weight of the book.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So now Tulane University has a classroom that looks a lot like it could be a cool library. and I'm not sure what they've done. This was many years ago when I was there, and what they've done in the meantime. But that always tickled me, because this is one of the top echelon schools in
Sure.
the country, and whoops.
Whoopsie daisy. But think about it, right? I was in the library in Johnson County, and admittedly, it's a small town library, but for a small Wyoming town, it's pretty cool. Before the program, I was telling Ken that they have a Wyoming history section that is, in my mind, far better than a lot of different libraries in the state. But I remember when I was in high school, they had an entire bookcase that was full of philosophy, pretty much anything that you wanted, good stuff, bad stuff, which, by the way, you should read both of those so you can figure things out for yourself. But several years later, I was helping out with the debate team, I don't know, maybe 6-8 years ago, and I needed a couple of books. And I knew just the place to go to find them, and I go into the library, and that entire bookcase that was full of all of those great works was reduced to half of a shelf. And it's like Ken said, we don't apparently we don't keep books we don't keep books for the sake of them being there, for the sake of knowledge, for them being there for in case you want to read them. Oh, no. If they're popular, then they stay. If not so popular, then we go. Which is why I think what Diane is doing over here, and at some point we'll do a video and walk through the library so you can see it. It's small, but I think it's pretty cool. Lots of books that you're not going to find over across the street at the county library. Well, anyway, we've got a few minutes left in the program. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah. I can't believe I forgot to talk about this thing. Wow. Another letter to the editor in the Cowboy. Now, just a couple of comments on their letters to the editor section. They don't publish them very often, and you would have to think. Their new ad, by the way, is Wyoming's only statewide paper, which is interesting because they're not a paper. But anyway, you would think that they get a lot more letters to the editor than they actually publish. And the one that I saw this morning was Preventing Firearms Suicide in Wyoming. And I'll give you 3 guesses what the conclusion of this letter to the editor is. It's that we have too many guns. But let me just read you the first couple paragraphs here. Quote, and before I do that, let me tell you who this is from. It is from Paul Nisdat, and he is with, let's see here, where is it? Oh, man, I deleted the credentials part, but he's with some anti-gun violence outfit. Anyway, here's what he says. While Wyoming braces for another wildfire season, another kind of fire is already raging deep in the heart of the Cowboy State. Firearms suicide is stealing loved ones and neighbors from communities across Wyoming. Just like the worst wildfires, this is a fire we can fight and win. I wonder which one he's talking about. The latest finalized data from the CDC shows that Wyoming had the highest rate of gun suicide in the nation, more than twice the national average and 10 times higher than Massachusetts, a state with the lowest rate. Montana, Alaska, and Idaho follow closely behind. It's no coincidence. These are also the states with the highest levels of gun ownership. If you read, okay, so this is correlation. And anytime you read a piece like this, I want you to think of uh, this phrase: correlation does not equal causation. Okay, so for example, let's say that you were doing a study on drownings in the summer, and you determined that the amount of drownings go up in the summer months, which kind of makes sense. You know, it's warmer outside, people are around more water. And you also find out that the consumption of ice cream goes up during the summer months, which makes sense to you also because when it's hot outside, people want something cold, ice cream, icicles, what do they call them? Like the not lollipops. See, I haven't even had one. Popsicle. Yes, there we go. I haven't had one of those since I was about 10. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, you determine that the consumption of ice cream goes up in the summer, and you also notice that the amount of drownings go up in the summer, and you correlate those two and say that the amount of drownings is directly due to the increase in consumption of ice cream.
Let me give you one more. I'm going to go out on a limb here and risk my entire political career.
Okay.
My dad always used to say, we never had a world war till we gave women the right to vote.
Whoa! Agent 29. Yeah, there we go. Risking your political career. The point is, my friends, that correlation does not equal causation. And just because you happen to have a lot of guns around, that doesn't mean that suicides or violence is going to go up. Those are human conditions that you're talking about. You could leave this pistol that's on my hip right here, I could leave it sitting on this desk for 30 years. And if nobody came in and touched it, that gun wouldn't hurt anybody. It would just sit there and collect dust. The truth is, my friends, and I think that Seth Shumaker said it right, that we have a problem with mental health. We don't have a problem with other things. It's mental health. And until you solve that, you can't solve threats to judges, and you're not going to solve suicides or any of this. It's not the gun that creates the problem. It's a human problem. It's not a gun problem.
And we don't look at the fact that virtually everybody in America has now been educated in a public school system which denies the existence of God. It denies, you were dust in the wind, and from dust you'll return. So what difference does it really make? We have devalued human life. Abortion is nothing to us. We got to get rid of the old people and make Soylent Green because they're no longer productive. I mean, all of these things that dehumanize us are taken away, and we never seem to discuss those. We don't talk about violent video games where you make a game out of going out and blowing people and things up.
Yeah.
And those have also got to have a factor in somebody's psyche.
Well, and think about this. A child spends their entire educational career in a school, and they're told from the time that they're very young that they are the result of some cosmic accident, that at some point an amino acid and a protein came together and created a single-celled organism, and that magically, somehow, down the road, that organism evolved, and it crawled out of the ocean, and here we all are. Well, what that leads you to believe is that there's nothing miraculous about you, that you, in and of yourself, are not important. And the truth couldn't be further from that, that when you look at it, like the miracle of human life is truly incredible. That it is a miracle, and that every single person is an individual, and every single person matters. And when you tell a child from the age that they're very, very young, from the very beginning, that they don't matter, that they're the result of some cosmic accident, then it should come as no surprise later on when that child chooses to do something horrible to themselves. Because why would it matter? We've got to get back to teaching people about God. We've got to turn our faces back to God. And a lot of the problems that we're dealing with, mental illness included, in my opinion, it can only be solved with God. And let's be honest, the gravity of the problems that we are facing are only going to be solved with God. We are not capable of solving a lot of the things in this world on our own. And, we talk about a lot of issues on this program, and, many of them are created by man. And, unfortunately, many of them are not going to be solved by man alone. In fact, I would say that all of them are not going to be solved by man alone. But anyway, I mean, this whole thing, this whole conversation, AI, all of this, I think it all plays into the same thing, that in our arrogance, we create things that we are unable to control. Whoopsie.
Nuclear power is the same thing. God,
Sure.
God said to Adam when he fell, he said, "By the sweat of your brow, you're going to earn your living. It's going to be work." And what are we trying to do? We're trying to find free and eternal and simple energy or power forever. We were promised that isn't going to be the way that it should.
Well, and think about this, Ken, that we have created something that we are absolutely unable to control. A spent nuclear fuel rod, and the amount of time, the half-life varies with whatever isotope you're using, but we have created something that is not going to disperse in 50 years, no matter what you say about these stupid casks. You only know that maybe they're good for 40 years, and I don't even think that you know that. But these things are not going to degrade in 100 years, 500 years, in some cases, 1,000 years. And, I really question the wisdom of, putting any of these things in the ground. Now, and let me just talk about this, and I have to bring up this topic with only 4 minutes left in the show, but anyway, I've seen a lot of comments online say, well, we got to be responsible. If we're going to have nuclear power in this state, we have to take care of our own stuff. And we got to, personal responsibility. You conservatives, you always talk about that. You're right. I do think that we have to have personal responsibility, which I would argue that if you are Bill Gates and you are building a nuclear power plant, then you are personally responsible for whatever thing that produces. And to lay it off on Wyoming citizens, I mean, that's not conservative at all. Secondarily, do I want affordable, efficient, long-term power? You bet I do. But I also want us to be able to take care of the results of that. Nuclear power is great, but I don't want the waste in this state. And you may say that, oh, well, David, you're not being responsible. Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we should be very trepidatious about all of this nuclear power. And a lot of other things, AI included, you name it. All right. Well, tomorrow on the show, we're going to have an interview with my good pal, Sean Meehan. We're going to talk about the Convention of States. We'll do that at 9 o'clock at the top of the second hour. And then on Thursday, the Wyoming Speaker of the House, Chip Diamond, will join us. And who knows what we'll talk about in that. And then probably sometime next week, I've got an author. He's written a new book about Deadwood. And he claims that he's got some new information about Wild Bill Hickok and Sheriff Bullock that ought to be a pretty interesting interview. I think something completely different. But that'll do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good rest of your afternoon, and we'll talk again tomorrow, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns. At the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.